The city never slept, and neither did I that night. Neon lights painted the wet streets in hues of red and blue, their reflections shimmering like secrets on the pavement. The hum of passing cars echoed through the darkness, reminding me that the world kept moving even when I felt frozen in time. My chest ached with a restless energy I couldn't name. Something was pulling me toward the unknown, and I wasn't strong enough to resist. I pushed open the heavy doors of a dimly lit bar, the kind of place where danger lingered in the air like smoke. Conversations hushed when I entered, but I kept walking, refusing to show hesitation. My heels clicked against the wooden floor, each step syncing with the wild rhythm of my heartbeat. I wasn't supposed to be there, yet it felt inevitable. Fate had drawn me into the lion's den, and I was too curious to leave. That's when I saw him, Bryan. His presence was impossible to ignore, sharp and magnetic like gravity itself had chosen him as its center. He sat in the corner, a glass of whiskey untouched in his hand, shadows clinging to him as if they belonged there. His gaze locked onto mine, and the room suddenly grew smaller, suffocating. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. His silence spoke louder than 1,000 words. I tried to look away, but my eyes betrayed me. There was something predatory in the way he observed, like a man who owned every inch of space around him. The air thickened, carrying a current of fear laced with something far more dangerous, desire. My breath caught in my throat as if he'd stolen it without moving a muscle. It was reckless, but every part of me screamed to step closer, not away. The bartender whispered his name like a warning. Bryan. Just one word, but it struck through me like lightning. Stories surrounded him, tales of blood and power, of enemies who never lived to tell the ending. Yet there he was, flesh and bone, staring at me as if I was the only thing that mattered. And in that instant, I realized something terrifying. I didn't want to run. I wanted to stay. Danger had a face, and it was his. The man I should fear most was the one I couldn't tear myself away from. Every instinct screamed that I was stepping into fire, and fire doesn't forgive. But instead of turning back, I leaned into the heat, letting it swallow me whole. I had no idea then that this was only the beginning, that Bryan wasn't just a man, but the storm I had been waiting for. I don't remember choosing to walk toward him, but my body moved as if under a spell. Each step I took pulled me deeper into his gravity until the rest of the bar disappeared. The air between us seemed alive, heavy with unspoken promises and unshakable threats. I could feel his eyes tracing every movement, every breath, as though he was learning me before we even spoke. It was intoxicating and terrifying. Bryan didn't greet me with words. Instead, he tilted his glass slightly, an invitation so subtle it almost felt like a command. My hand trembled as I reached for the empty seat across from him. Sitting there felt like crossing a line, one I couldn't retreat from once my decision was made. His silence pressed against my skin, more suffocating than any sentence he could have spoken. I held his gaze, and in it, I saw danger wrapped in velvet. Finally, his voice cut through the tension, deep and deliberate. You don't belong here. The words should have sent me running, but instead they rooted me to the chair. His tone carried no warmth, yet it held me captive, as though he'd marked me with nothing more than sound. My lips parted, but no response came, just a shallow breath that betrayed how shaken I was. He smirked, as if my silence was exactly what he expected. The bartender glanced nervously in our direction, but Bryan didn't look away from me. His focus was sharp, like a blade pressing against the softest part of my soul. Curiosity is dangerous, he murmured, his fingers drumming against the glass, steady and controlled. And danger always collects its price. My pulse quickened, but I couldn't look away. I should have feared the weight of his words, but instead I craved their meaning. There was a stillness in him, a terrifying calm that belonged to men who had nothing left to fear. His confidence wasn't arrogance, it was survival carved into his bones. I wondered how many nights like this he had lived through, how many strangers had sat across from him, unaware they were dancing with a storm. But when his eyes softened for a fraction of a second, I felt something else, the glimpse of a man behind the myth. I told myself I could leave at any moment, that I wasn't trapped in his world. But when he leaned closer, lowering his voice to a whisper only I could hear, I knew I was lying. He said, "The question is," slowly, each word brushing against me like fire, "do you want to walk away?" My heart thundered in my chest. In that moment, the truth became undeniable. I didn't want to walk away at all.
The silence between us grew louder than the music playing in the background. Every beat of my heart seemed to echo in my ears, reminding me that I was sitting far too close to something I didn't understand. Bryan didn't move much, yet every small gesture, the curl of his fingers around the glass, the flicker of his eyes, felt calculated. It was as if he was teaching me that real danger doesn't shout, it whispers. And I was already leaning closer to hear it. When his hand finally touched the table, just inches from mine, I froze. It wasn't contact, but the proximity was enough to send a shiver racing down my spine. My body betrayed me, reacting before my mind could catch up. I wanted to pull away, but I also wanted to close the gap. His stillness was a trap, one that invited me to step inside willingly. And maybe that was the cruelest part. I wanted to. He studied me with the patience of a predator, as though he could see every thought crossing my mind. "You think you're strong enough to sit here," he said, his voice smooth but dangerous. "But strength isn't measured by how close you get to fire. It's measured by how long you survive the burn." His words pierced me, striking that place between fear and fascination. I should have stood up, but instead I leaned forward. The bar around us blurred, fading into nothing but shadows and smoke. It was only him, his presence, pressing against me like gravity. I searched his face for cracks, for anything human beneath the steel, but he gave me nothing. And yet, in that emptiness, I felt myself falling. His eyes held no promises, no comfort, only inevitability. He was a storm, and I was already caught in it. I wanted to ask who he really was, but the name Bryan already carried weight I couldn't bear. It wasn't just a name, it was a legend, whispered in fear by others who wouldn't dare sit where I sat. But here, across from him, Bryan didn't feel like a monster or a myth. He felt real, real enough that if I reached across the table, I could touch him, real enough to ruin me. He leaned back finally, exhaling as though releasing something he had held too long. His gaze never wavered, but his voice softened just enough to unsettle me. He said, "You'll have to decide soon whether you want to be safe or whether you want to belong to me." My breath caught. In that single sentence, he had given me a choice that didn't feel like a choice at all. The rain came down harder as we left the bar. Neon smeared like painted tears across the pavement. Bryan's hand found mine with a grip that anchored me. I felt both protected and exposed in that small touch. Some part of me understood this night would change everything. We moved through the city like two ghosts with a secret. Every alley we cut through felt like a thread toward the unknown. Cars passed, headlights slicing the darkness into silver knives. He walked with a purpose that made my pulse keep pace. I tried to name the feeling, but words always failed me. He stopped beneath a rusting street lamp and looked at me. Raindrops collected on his lashes like tiny, dangerous jewels. He said, "You're not like the others." Soft, but certain. The way he said it felt like a verdict and a confession combined. I wanted to ask him what he meant, but my voice hid behind the rain. In the silence between his words, the city seemed to breathe. We both knew the danger that trailed the edges of his life, yet in that moment, closeness felt like the only honest choice. He spoke my name once, and the syllable was a private compass. I allowed myself to follow, though every rational part pulled back. He led me to a narrow stairwell behind an old deli. The stairwell smelled of oil and old secrets, and my shoes echoed. As we climbed, he kept glancing over his shoulder, alert and tense. There was a careful choreography in his movements that hinted at habit. I realized then that survival had become his second nature. At the top, a small door opened to a hidden room with maps. Strings and pins marked routes only he would dare to plan. He closed the door and finally let the quiet settle between us. For the first time, the mask slipped, and I saw the man behind legend. He said simply, "If you stay, you will never be the same."
The room smelled of old leather, smoke, and rain. Maps covered the walls like veins across a living heart. Each pin marked not just places, but stories left untold. I could feel the weight of every secret pressed into silence. Bryan stood there like a man bound to his own fate. He lit a cigarette and let the smoke curl slowly upward. The glow of the flame highlighted sharp lines on his face. For a fleeting second, I thought I saw exhaustion in him. But exhaustion didn't weaken him, it only made him sharper. It was the kind of tired carried only by men who never rest. "You don't belong here," he repeated, quieter this time. But his eyes betrayed him, lingering where they shouldn't. There was danger in his restraint, a war inside his silence. I knew what he meant. He was warning me, not rejecting me. Still, the warning was the very thing that kept me closer. I touched one of the maps, tracing the red string between pins. The path felt like a story written in shadows and blood. "What are you running from?" I asked without turning. The silence stretched so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then softly he said, "Not running, hunting." Those two words lodged themselves deep inside my chest. They carried a promise and a threat all at once. Whoever he hunted had no chance of escaping his reach, but in his tone, I felt something more, personal, inevitable, like the hunt itself was tied to the man he had become. He stepped closer, the smoke fading into his shadow. I felt his presence before I saw him at my side. His hand brushed mine against the map, deliberate and firm. The world outside that room no longer seemed to exist, and I knew then I was already too deep to walk away. The night swallowed us as we stepped back onto the streets. Rain-slicked pavement reflected neon like fractured mirrors. Bryan's hand gripped mine, a tether in the chaos around us. Every shadow felt alive, every corner a potential threat. My heartbeat matched the rhythm of the city, fast, jagged, relentless. He didn't speak, but I understood every glance, every pause. The city whispered danger with every passing car and pedestrian. I wanted to ask where we were going, but words failed me. Bryan's presence alone commanded attention, even in silence. Following him felt less like choice and more like surrender. Suddenly, a car's headlight sliced through the alleyway. I ducked instinctively, pressed against the cold brick wall. Bryan moved like a shadow, pulling me behind him with precision. The engine growled as if it knew we weren't meant to be seen. My pulse screamed in my ears, loud and insistent. We turned into a narrower alleyway. The sound of footsteps echoed too close, deliberate, calculated. Bryan's eyes darkened, sharp with awareness and danger combined. I felt the thrill rise like wildfire in my chest, unstoppable. Fear and excitement twisted together, indistinguishable and raw. He pressed me closer, whispering words that burned into me. "Stay close," he said, voice low and urgent, almost a growl. I nodded, too aware of my trembling fingers in his grasp. Every step forward was a battle between instinct and desire, and yet I realized I didn't want to step back. When the alley ended, he pulled me into shadowed steps. We moved with a rhythm only we could understand, synchronized. Each heartbeat, each breath, a reminder that we were alive. The chase wasn't just physical, it was a pull I couldn't resist. And in that moment, I understood I was caught completely in him. The warehouse loomed ahead, dark and abandoned like a secret waiting to be exposed. Bryan led me through the narrow entrance, his hand never leaving mine. Shadows clung to the walls, twisting with every flicker of neon from outside. I could hear my own breathing, rapid and uneven, betraying the storm inside me. Every step into the darkness felt like stepping further into a world I didn't fully understand. Inside, the air was thick with dust, smoke, and the faint scent of gunmetal. Crates and barrels formed a maze, hiding whispers of danger behind every corner. Bryan's eyes scanned the space with a predator's precision, alert and calculating. I followed silently, trusting him more than I had ever trusted anyone. The thrill of the unknown coiled around my chest like a living thing. A sudden noise froze us in place, a faint creak somewhere beyond the shadows. He pressed me against the crates, his body shielding mine as instinct took over. Every fiber of my being screamed to run, but I stayed, caught between fear and fascination. Bryan's fingers brushed my arm in a fleeting, electric touch that made me shiver. The line between danger and desire blurred, and I couldn't tell where one ended. We moved silently, hearts pounding like war drums in the empty space. Every shadow seemed alive, every distant whisper a warning of what awaited. He whispered directions, low and urgent, guiding us deeper into the maze. I clung to him, my anchor in the storm, willing myself to stay composed. The danger was real, yet the thrill of being near him made every risk intoxicating. At the back of the warehouse, a faint light spilled from a hidden doorway. Bryan glanced at me, eyes intense, reading my fear and excitement with ease. "This is it," he murmured, voice low and dangerous. "We go in together." The choice was no longer mine. It was ours, bound by the gravity of this moment. I nodded, feeling the surge of adrenaline and anticipation coursing through me. As we stepped toward the door, the city outside faded into silence. Every noise, every shadow, every heartbeat belonged only to us now. I could feel the electricity between us crackle with every step forward. Bryan's presence was suffocating and intoxicating, the perfect storm I couldn't escape. And in that instant, I knew the real danger and the real story was just beginning. The alley outside felt narrower, the night pressing in like a living thing. Bryan's hand gripped mine tighter, pulling me closer with a silent warning. Every footstep echoed, every distant noise a potential threat to our fragile escape. My heart pounded, matching the rhythm of the city around us, alive and electric. I realized then that the danger wasn't just behind us, it was everywhere. A sudden shadow darted across the street, and Bryan froze instantly, his eyes locked on it, calculating and sharp, every muscle coiled for action. I followed his gaze, spotting the glint of Mel too late to hide. The thrill of fear surged through me, mingling with an undeniable pull toward him. It was impossible to separate danger from desire in that moment. He whispered my name, low and deliberate, a command I couldn't resist. We moved as one, silent, weaving through alleys and side streets with purpose. The city seemed alive, watching, waiting to see if we would survive the night. Every heartbeat was amplified, every shadow a potential enemy in disguise. Yet, despite the fear, I felt a strange exhilaration I couldn't deny. We paused behind a crumbling brick wall, the hum of distant traffic masking our presence. Bryan's eyes scanned the street ahead, calculating every possibility, every risk. His hand remained on mine, firm and grounding, a lifeline in the chaos. I could feel his breath warm against my ear, sending shivers down my spine. It was the kind of closeness that made the world beyond impossible to remember. He whispered, "Almost there," voice tight with urgency and restraint. I followed without question, letting instinct guide me through the maze of darkness. The alley ended at a chain-link fence, shadows pooling like ink at our feet. Bryan crouched, signaling me to follow, each movement precise, rehearsed. I realized then that survival depended not just on speed, but on trust, my trust in him. We slipped through the fence and into a deserted courtyard, heartbeats still racing. For a fleeting moment, relief washed over me, sharp and fleeting as rain. But I knew the night wasn't over, danger still lurking just beyond sight. Bryan's eyes met mine, intensity burning in every glance, unspoken words hanging. I understood then that every choice, every step with him was a step into the unknown. The courtyard was quiet, but the tension pressed down like heavy fog. Bryan moved like a shadow, every step deliberate, eyes scanning for unseen threats. I followed closely, aware that one wrong move could ruin everything. The air smelled of rain and asphalt, sharp and electric, keeping my senses alert. Every sound, footsteps, distant engines, even the wind, felt amplified in the night. A faint murmur of voices drifted from the corner of the yard. Bryan's jaw tightened, muscles coiled like a predator about to strike. He whispered me to stay low, and I obeyed without hesitation. The danger wasn't just around us. It was woven into every shadow. I realized that being with him meant accepting fear as a constant companion. He leaned close, whispering instructions that made my pulse race. Every word was precise, practiced, a plan designed to survive the unseen. I traced his movements, mimicking, learning, aware of how fragile the line between life and death was. His presence was magnetic, pulling me forward even as I feared what awaited us. And somehow, fear and desire were indistinguishable, entwined like smoke and flame. The voices grew closer, a shadow breaking the dim light of the courtyard. Bryan pressed me against the wall, shielding me with a force that was both physical and unspoken. I could feel the heat radiating from him, his determination grounding my trembling body. Every breath, every heartbeat was a reminder that we were dangerously exposed. Yet, I couldn't pull away. I wanted to be near him despite the threat. A figure emerged from the shadows, and Bryan's eyes sharpened like blades. He whispered a single word that made my stomach twist with anticipation. The unknown enemy moved with purpose, unaware of how close we had gotten. I realized then that the stakes weren't just survival. They were trust, loyalty, and choices. And my choice was already clear. I was with him, no matter the consequences. As the figure passed, we melted back into darkness, heartbeats pounding in unison. The city beyond seemed distant, irrelevant compared to the world we were navigating. Bryan's hand brushed mine once more, grounding me in the chaos and danger. I felt alive in a way that terrified me, drawn deeper into his orbit. And I knew the final chapter was approaching, where nothing could remain hidden. The night air was sharp, carrying the scent of rain and asphalt. Bryan's grip on my hand was firm, grounding me in the storm of uncertainty. We moved through the deserted streets like two shadows bound by fate. Every step forward carried the weight of choices we couldn't undo. The city seemed alive, watching, waiting for the inevitable confrontation. Ahead, the warehouse loomed like a fortress of secrets and danger. Bryan's eyes burned with intensity, a storm hidden behind controlled calm. I followed silently, knowing that every heartbeat was a step closer to the unknown. The thrill of fear mixed with desire, inseparable and overwhelming. I realized that whatever happened next would define everything between us. Inside, shadows danced across walls lined with crates and maps. Every corner held the echo of threats, every sound a potential warning. Bryan moved with fluid precision, protecting and guiding me through the chaos. I clung to him, both terrified and exhilarated by the power he wielded. This was no longer just survival. It was a test of trust and courage. Suddenly, footsteps echoed, sharp and deliberate, signaling the arrival of enemies. Bryan pressed me against the wall, eyes scanning every movement, calculating our chances. The tension was suffocating, the danger palpable, every second stretching endlessly. I could feel the electricity between us crackling with unspoken words and promises. It was the kind of moment that could break or bind us forever. He whispered in my ear, low and urgent, "No matter what, stay close." I nodded, surrendering to the inevitability of the night and our intertwined fates. Together, we stepped forward, shadows merging, hearts beating as one in the darkness. The confrontation was imminent, but I trusted him with a faith I couldn't explain. Every instinct screamed danger, yet I couldn't imagine being anywhere else but here. As we faced the unknown, the city seemed to pause, holding its breath with us. Bryan's hand tightened around mine, a promise that neither fear nor danger could sever. The storm outside mirrored the chaos inside, rain thrashing against the walls. I realized then that I was no longer the girl I had been at the start of this night. With him, with this danger, with this forbidden pull, I had crossed the line, and there was no turning back.